Sometimes, people walk into our lives and leave just as quickly. Without a word, without a reason, and without saying goodbye. It can be confusing, even painful, because we naturally expect closure when something ends. When someone disappears without an explanation, it often leaves us questioning ourselves. Did we do something wrong? Did they lose interest? Or were they simply hiding feelings they could not put into words? The truth is, people who disappear without saying goodbye are not always doing it out of cruelty. Often, it reflects something deeper within them, something about fear, avoidance, or the inability to handle emotional situations. When a person suddenly withdraws, it may be because they fear confrontation. Not everyone has the emotional strength to face a difficult conversation. Saying goodbye often requires courage, honesty, and vulnerability, but some people find those emotions overwhelming. Instead of facing the possibility of hurting someone or being judged, they choose silence. They convince themselves that leaving without explanation will cause less pain, but in reality, it often creates more confusion and lingering questions for the other person. Another reason people disappear without saying goodbye is emotional immaturity. When someone has not learned how to process their own emotions, they may find it easier to run away than to explain what they feel. For them, avoidance feels safer than communication. Instead of sitting down and being honest, they choose distance. It's not always because they don't care, but because they don't know how to care in the right way. Their silence is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own struggles with handling emotions. In some cases, people who disappear without saying goodbye are dealing with personal battles that have nothing to do with you. Maybe they are going through stress, depression, or overwhelming changes in their own life. They might not want to burden others with their problems, so they retreat quietly. For them, disappearing feels like the only way to cope. Unfortunately, this leaves the other person feeling abandoned. But the truth is, sometimes the disappearance has more to do with their inner chaos than with the relationship itself. It is also common for people to leave without saying goodbye when they feel guilty. Maybe they know they have hurt you, disappointed you, or broken your trust. Facing you would mean confronting their guilt, and for some people, that is too heavy to bear. Instead of apologizing, they escape. Instead of explaining, they vanish. To them, avoiding you feels easier than admitting their mistakes. But deep down, their silence carries the weight of guilt they cannot express. On the other hand, disappearing can also be a form of control. Some people intentionally leave without explanation to create confusion and keep power over your emotions. They know that silence often hurts more than words. They know that unanswered questions will replay in your mind. By walking away without closure, they leave you searching for meaning while they move on without accountability. This is not about weakness but about manipulation. If someone disappears to control your emotions, it's a sign of selfishness rather than genuine care. However, it's important to remember that not everyone who disappears without saying goodbye is doing it with bad intentions. Some people believe that leaving quietly is an act of kindness. They think that avoiding a painful goodbye will protect you from more hurt. They underestimate the human need for closure, and in trying to shield you, they end up leaving you with unanswered questions. Their silence is not meant to harm but to soften the ending. Unfortunately, it rarely works that way, because human hearts crave understanding. When someone disappears without saying goodbye, it often reveals more about them than about you. It shows their fears, their emotional limits, and their way of coping with discomfort, but it does not define your worth. Too often, people blame themselves when someone leaves without closure. But the truth is, the decision to disappear is usually about the other person's struggles. It reflects what they could not face, not what you failed to provide. Think of how endings shape our memories. A goodbye gives closure, a sense of completion, even if it's painful. But when someone disappears, the story feels unfinished. That lack of closure can haunt us, because human beings naturally seek meaning. We replay conversations, analyze gestures, and wonder what we missed. But the truth is, some people simply do not have the ability to give closure. They leave things open-ended because that's how they live, with unspoken words, unresolved feelings, and unfinished chapters. It's also worth noting that disappearing can sometimes be a survival instinct. For people who grew up in environments where expressing feelings was unsafe or discouraged, avoidance becomes their natural response. Saying goodbye might trigger deep fears of rejection, conflict, or vulnerability. Walking away without explanation feels less terrifying than facing emotions directly. In their minds, silence is safer. So, what does it really mean when someone disappears without saying goodbye? It means they are carrying something: fear, guilt, immaturity, personal struggles, or even selfishness. It means they chose silence over words, avoidance over honesty. But most importantly, It means their disappearance reflects their own inner world, not your value as a person. Instead of chasing answers that may never come, it's healthier to accept that not every story ends with a clear goodbye. Some endings are silent, some are confusing, and some will never make sense. But you do not need someone else's closure to heal. You can create your own. By recognizing that their silence is about them, not you, you take back your power. You stop waiting for an explanation that may never arrive, and instead, you give yourself permission to move forward. People who disappear without saying goodbye teach us an important lesson. Closure does not always come from others. Sometimes, closure is something you give yourself by choosing to let go. By choosing peace over confusion, and by choosing to value yourself even when someone else failed to. Their silence may have left an empty space, but your self-respect can fill it in the end. Disappearing without a goodbye may say more about fear than about love, more about avoidance than about honesty, and more about their struggles than your worth. The best response you can have is to honor yourself enough not to wait for answers that may never come. Instead, move forward with strength, knowing that the people who truly care for you will never leave you questioning whether you mattered. They will say goodbye, they will explain, and they will give you the respect of closure. And those who do not, those who disappear without a word, were never meant to be the ones who stayed.